Hello world, I am Curtis Simpson, and this was going to be Vejective's in-depth review of Thinking with Type, the third edition by Lupton. But after going through both editions, the second and the third, side by side, reading them simultaneously, each page at a time, I looked at all the additions, all of the subtractions, all of the upgrades. There's really only one reason you need to buy this book: the seeds. What are seeds? Simply put, seeds are ideas and concepts that turn into inspiration. When it comes to thinking with type, there are probably two main archetypes that are going to read this book. I'm guessing you're one of these two. Those would be either the student or the professional. The student. The first time most people come in contact with Ellen Lupton's Thinking with Type will likely be at the very start of your graphic design journey. That's when I first came in contact with this book. I read the first edition in my Introduction to Typography class. For you, for the student, seeds will likely shine a light on all the things that you don't know. This can come in the form of terms like kerning, humanist sans, variable fonts, and tittles. When you're first starting out, you'll likely be overwhelmed by all of the potential there is, all of the possible avenues to explore in typography. Don't let this turn into anxiety. Take this as excitement. This is a new journey, and it's going to be fun. The professional. As the professional, you're likely watching this right now, wondering if it's worth it or not to pick up the third edition. It is. You should. But not because typography has significantly changed since the last edition was released, even if it was 14 years, but because after years working with typography, you'll read this book with a different set of eyes. The concepts will take on new meanings. With life experience, you'll find yourself making unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated topics and concepts. You'll be inspired to create and concept in ways that you weren't capable of as a student. You'll likely be reminded of why you fell in love with typography in the first place. And either you'll finish this book with a calming sense of direction, or if you're like me, you'll finish this book with a head full of fresh ideas, your chest bursting with excitement, and a desire to explore and create in ways that you hadn't imagined before. My personal seeds. I have read and reread every edition of Ellen Lupton's Thinking with Type, and at very different stages in my career. So what did I walk away with this time? I have 7 seeds that I'm going to share with you. Hopefully you'll find them interesting, but regardless of that, I do think they will serve as tangible examples to help demonstrate this abstract concept. And hopefully this will inspire you to revisit the book or read it for the first time. Number 1, House Industries, Las Vegas Typeface Family. Disclosure, I love Las Vegas. I lived there for 14 years until recently moving to Brazil. So whenever I came across this page and Thinking with Type, it's been in all 3 editions, I always smiled. It wasn't until reading the 3rd edition, though, that I realized this wasn't the typeface created for the now defunct Las Vegas Castaways Casino. It was actually created by House Industries as part of a larger Las Vegas-inspired type family. And as someone who has obsessed over vintage Las Vegas for over a decade, I can 100% co-sign that these are very accurate homages to their inspirations. And I'm excited to purchase and play around with the entire typeface family. I really appreciate a great typeface, but even more than that, I love a typeface story. Number 2, stacking typography. The concept of stacking typography in itself isn't necessarily new. I've created designs of my own with stacking vertical typography. My vintage Las Vegas obsession has lent my eyes to hundreds of vertical marquees, but the idea of creating a typeface, designing a typeface specifically with the intention of being able to stack the characters, at least Latin characters, had never crossed my mind. Not until I came across Bungie in the 3rd edition of Thinking with Type. And this concept is really cool. I love, like I said, a good typeface story, but I also love a very functional typeface. My favorite typeface of all time is OCR-A. I love the form of it, but I really love the functional story behind it. So reading about Bungie in the 3rd edition, it really is inspiring me to go down that rabbit hole and see what other typefaces have been designed with very specific niche functions in mind. Number 3, Manuscript Grids. This one might seem silly, like just create margins. Why go through the trouble of creating such a complex system? And to be honest, yeah, I'm never going to use the technique like this to put together a page spread. But what it reminded me of is one of my really design loves in life, and that's Gothic tracery. And the way that Gothic tracery is created is very similar to the way that they were creating these manuscript grids. Sometimes we get distracted from the items on our bucket list. Gothic tracery is one for me. Maybe that sounds silly to you, but it is. And seeds can serve as reminders for these types of things. And it reminded me, it reignited that passion for me. And I have a set date I have on the calendar for when I'm going to restart my Gothic tracery learning and creation. And I have the third edition of Thinking with Type to thank for that. Number 4, linearity. Linearity is such an abstract concept, especially when it comes to typography. It had never crossed my mind that prior to the written word, it was almost impossible to break free from linearity. Like before books, you would listen to someone tell a story, and there was no way to jump ahead in that unless you're just like, dude, jump ahead. But with typography, it makes navigating information infinitely more efficient. I think it's something we all take for granted, being able to sort through a well-designed piece of text via headers, page numbers, tables of contents, being able to click on a link or type into a search bar. The impact that typography has had on breaking free from linearity and the ability of humans to increase our information and knowledge consumption is literally incalculable. I feel like Michael Scott right now, incalculable. And honestly, this seed is such like a perspective shifting concept. I feel like I'm still taking time to process what it means. Garamond through the ages. This page is from the second edition of Thinking with Type. It was removed in the third for whatever reason, but the seed here is the idea that a typeface might change based on trends or technology. I actually had a brief conversation with Letterform Archives over on Blue Sky, and I showed them this page. I said I'd be interested in the concept on a larger scale. Like this page only shows Garamond, but what would it look like with a larger sample size? And whoever runs their account said they love the idea, so it's entirely possible we will see Letterform Archive do some sort of larger exploration of this. And if not, then I will just have to take that role. Injectives will do their own in-depth analysis. So either way, something to look forward to. Number 6, the Vignelli Canon. Massimo Vignelli is one of these mythical characters in the storybook of graphic design. And I was too young to like really fully appreciate or understand about him when I was in school learning. I'm very familiar with a lot of his proteges, the big names in the industry right now, but I honestly know very little about him or his philosophies, other than the same highlights that everyone's familiar with. So when I came across Vignelli's 6 preferred typefaces in the third edition of Thinking with Type, it inspired me to dig deeper, and I came across the actual Vignelli Canon, not just the title of this page, but the book that he wrote towards the end of his life. And I'm going to be reading that in the next few days. Number 7, Golden Type and Beowolf. This is the last seed, and it's the one closest and most actionable for me, so I'm going to take a little longer to explain it. There are times when I come across a typeface and it literally stops me in my tracks. If I see it in a book, I have to put down the book, immediately start searching, figure out everything that I can about it. And Golden Type was one of those fonts. Beowolf as well, but let's talk about Golden Type first. Golden Type was a typeface designed by William Morris for the Kelmscott Press. And when I learned this, it made me wonder what other publishers were commissioning their own typefaces for their books. This led me to Hollandse Medieval, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, which eventually led me to the revival of Silver Type, which was created by Canada Type. And I can't explain to you in words the feeling that I get when I look at Silver Type, the actual typeface. But if you ever experience this visceral reaction to a typeface like I do, stop what you're doing, focus on that, and try to pay attention, really pay attention, because there's something there. And I can't tell you what it is, and you might not know in the moment, but just absorb it because that's an important seed, I promise. Beowolf is a similar story. Beowolf is a typeface that blew my mind. I had this concept in recent years of, after dealing with Blender and dealing with the random functions in there, or seeing what other type designers were doing with variable fonts. But the idea of having a true random font was something that Letterer, I apologize to the Foundry. I don't really know how to say this. It's letter and air pressed together. Letterer. This is something that they were hacking together in 1989, 1990. And they found a way to hack PostScript to create the world's first random font. And immediately I wrote down in my notes, why isn't every font like this? Because it's such a cool concept. After reading the horror stories that came with publishers missing their print deadlines and things like that, and talking with Eric directly, sorry, again, don't know how to pronounce it. But after talking to one of the type designers directly on Instagram, I learned why this can't be a true random font anymore. But it does have a lot of alternates, so it feels much more random than a typical distressed typeface. So Beowolf is the one that's featured in Thinking with Type, but Beow Sans is the one that really caught my eye. And Beow Sans and Silvertype became the brand typefaces for Ejectives. You can see that Beow Sans was used for the word mark, and you can see that Silvertype has been used as the voice of this brand throughout the entire video that you've been watching. I don't expect you to find immediately actionable seeds. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but there will be times when typefaces will really speak to you. Make note of it. Put them in a place where you will be able to find them again, and just make good use of that, because that feeling is important and it doesn't come around very often. So when you do have that visceral reaction to a typeface or a design style, hold on to it. That's in a seed that really matters. Those are the seeds that were planted within me this time around, reading the third edition of Thinking with Type. If any of these resonated with you, or you can sense my genuine excitement about this concept or these 7 seeds that I just listed, then I think you'll really benefit from reading Thinking with Type, whether that's for the first time or the 5th time or the 50th time. I do think that it will serve you well. Is this the only place to seek out what I keep referring to as seeds? No, of course not. There are plenty of places to get this. But what I can guarantee is that Thinking with Type, especially the 3rd edition, is just packed full of surface level typography concepts, and you will find an abundance of seeds there. You will find an abundance of things that inspire you to create and motivate you to do more with typography than you would have prior to reading the book. So that's my pitch. I am Curtis Simpson, and this has been the Ejectives review of Thinking with Type, 3rd edition by Ellen Lupton.